I get to do the sermon too. So there's one thing I didn't understand when David came to me and he said, would you do the sermon when we get back from the conference? Because I just don't want to, I want to take it easy. I said, sure. But what I didn't know that he was going to get back a day before I did, and I wasn't going to get back until 10 o'clock last night. Or I might not have said yes. But before we begin the message today, I want to announce we have 2 more fully ordained rabbis in the community. Maybe we can bring them up here. Maybe we can bring them up here. Or they can stand or whatever. You all know who they are. David and Chris have completed their 2-year ordination process with the IMACS. And not just that, they survived the miracle of having me train them for 2 years. And that is a miracle of miracles. But I want you to know that if you don't know already, that if you have a problem or if you have a need or a concern, these 2 are able to answer your concerns as I have over the years, maybe better. But let's give them another hand for completing the process of becoming a rabbi. Thank you. You want to say something? All right.
Let my words be few.
Anyway. So, what a blessing. You got 3 rabbis in one community. 3 teachers. But to repeat, the Sidra today is entitled Shmot, and it means names. It begins with the names of the sons of Israel, followed by mystery after mystery. This parsha is filled with mysteries. Even our main character is confronted with the mystery of a bush that's in flames, however, it's not consumed. And that's just the beginning of the mysteries for us. Because within the flames of the bush, we have the angel of Adonai, a very mysterious character as well. The mysteries aren't over because next we have God tell Moshe to tell Israel, Asher has sent him to them. And what's the meaning of that phrase? Again, theologians and those who want you to believe they are have given us many choices. And then we have the unmistakable name of God spoken by Adonai in the passage, which I covered in the commentary. Adonai tells Moshe, this is the name by which I am to be remembered. However, since the name has not been spoken, since before the writing of the Septuagint 2,300 years ago, again, no one knows how to pronounce the name. The name Adonai is to be remembered by, and we don't even know how to pronounce the name. Even Yeshua never spoke it, but tells us the name is to be sanctified, which tells me that Adonai views the name to be so holy is not to be spoken in a profane world. And that is what he wants us to remember still. It's a mystery. And we hate mysteries. And so everyone's fighting over 6 different pronunciations of the name. The point is, our Jewish people did sanctify the name. Yeshua sanctified the name by not speaking it in this profane world. But let's focus on the angel of the Lord, because if we study these things, we can learn much about the Holy One. We can learn much about the mystery of the fellowship between Yeshua and the Father as well, the relationship between them. And so I want to go into chapter 3, and we find Moses tending a flock. The flock of his father-in-law, and he sees a bush that's on fire, and yet it's not consumed by the fire. The bush is near Mount Horeb, or what we commonly refer to as Mount Sinai. And we know that that's the place where God will again appear this time to the next time to the nation of Israel and speak 10 words. Let's read chapter 3, verses 2 and 3. Then the angel of Adonai appeared to him in the flame of a fire out of a bush. And so he looked and saw the bush was burning with fire, and yet it was not consumed. Moses thought, I will go and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. I want you to see that the angel of the Lord appeared to Moses in the flame of the fire out of a bush. And what makes this sight so strange is that the bush is not consumed by the fire, and that's a miracle. It's used, of course, to accredit God's messenger, who is the angel of the Lord, to give him creditation. And don't you find it curious that he uses a lowly bush, even though it's not consumed in the fire, to accredit the message and the messenger? If we look forward to the next time we come to Mount Sinai, we find that the whole mountain is ablaze. It certainly lends credibility to the message and the messenger. But here God uses a lowly bush, and we find God using a small thing, an insignificant thing, whose leaves would be food for the sheep and the goat that Moses is tending. If we look at the word bush, we also find that it means a thorny bush. And with that definition, some have concluded that with the thorns, God is identifying with the plight of his people Israel. And that reminds me of one who was crowned with thorns, as he identified with the plight of his people Israel and the whole of the world. Verse 4 says this, when Adonai saw that, he turned and looked, and God called to him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And so he answered, Hineni. And then he said, come no closer. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The first thing we should note is that God calls the place where he's going to reveal his name and some other mysteries, he calls it holy ground. And that means there's nothing profane. The ground is holy. And so really, when you think about it, we have this place where men have trodden many times, along with sheep and goats and all manners of wildlife, eating and doing their business, and yet now the ground is holy. And not that, but this is the first occurrence of the noun holy in Scriptures. And so what makes the ground holy? Well, of course, it's the presence of God and the revelation about to be revealed by God. He's about to speak his name, the sacred name. The same thing that made the temple of God holy ground. If we study the temple, we find that in the temple, when the priests were serving in the inner courts, they were not allowed to wear shoes because it was holy ground. There's another parallel here. In the first century, there was only one day, one man, one place the name of God could be spoken. And that place was holy ground, the Kodesh HaKodeshim, the Holy of Holies. And so you have to ask, how is it that Christians today can speak what they think is the holy name anywhere they choose? And so we have the angel of Adonai appearing to him in the flames of a bush, and then it says Adonai saw him, and then Elohim called to him from the midst of the bush. It would seem to me that either that bush is getting a bit crowded or it's the angel speaking. You know, angel speaking as Adonai is nothing new in our turning the pages of the Torah. We ran into a similar phenomenon in the story of Abraham, where we have someone who is first called a man, and then is called an angel, and it tells us that Adonai is speaking to Abraham. And so we have somewhat of a mystery here. We have an angel of the Lord in a bush, and yet the voice of Adonai, of the voice of God emulating from the bush. And since we see the angel or messenger of Adonai speaking for Adonai in these places, we might want to consider the words of Yeshua in John 14:10, where he says, "Don't you believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? And the words I say to you, I do not speak on my own, but the Father dwelling in me does his works." When you consider these passages together, you might come to the conclusion that the messenger of Adonai, or the angel of Adonai, the one speaking to Moses, is a pre-incarnate Messiah, Yeshua. Let's look at what verse 6 says. "Moreover," he said, because this is important. "Moreover," he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And so Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. And I want you to note that it does not say, "I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob," as it would appear most often. But he says, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob." To the best of my knowledge, this Siddur is the only place where this is worded like this in the whole of the Tanakh. And so you have to ask yourself, what is God trying to convey to Moses? When he says, "the God of your father," he uses the collective singular. And in doing so, he's telling Moses that God, the God of his father, has not forsaken his people nor his promise that was given to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, but that promise is the same. And then at that time, by using the name God of before Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, he's conveying that he had a personal relationship with each of these men. With each of these men, he had a personal relationship. He spoke to them. However, with each, it was not like he had with the others. It was a different relationship with each. And notice again, he says, "I am the God of," and then each of the names of the patriarchs. And he'll repeat it again later as he says, "Tell the children of Israel." He'll repeat it again, telling Moses that the children of Israel, that he had a personal relationship with each of their fathers. And he's going to keep his promise that he made to them. And to have he wants to have a personal relationship with the people. I found this in the commentary on the Amidah, where the wording is the same. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, teaching us again that God was known by each of the patriarchs in a unique and individual way. The same God, but to each their relationship and their experience of experiencing God was unique. In the same way, Moses is about to have a unique and amazing relationship with God. And God will also have a very unique relationship with the children of Israel. And I might add, the same is true of each of you. God is the same God. However, in his grace and in his mercy, he's able to reach out to us where we are, to each in a differing way. It doesn't make him different, but it shows his compassion and his mercy. If you ever wondered how the Holy One can reach our Jewish people, and he can reach Christians, and he's reached we Messianics, even though we all disagree about God, sometimes even vehemently, it's because in his grace and in his mercy, it's sufficient to reach each group so that all may believe. And he's able to reach us where we are. It's also a very good reason not to judge, not to get puffed up about what you believe, because I can tell you without any doubt one day we're going to find that we were wrong about many things. As an example, he may reach out to a pastor and tailor the message for a group of non-Jews in his congregation. He may look to another and tailor his message to our Jewish people, as long as each keeps Yeshua as the foundation of the message. You see, he's going to make something very clear in a few verses, and it's really what I want to focus on today. And that is, Adonai will be who he will be, who he chooses to be. He's not limited by what we believe. His mercy isn't dependent on how merciful you are. His forgiveness isn't dependent on your forgiveness. And I said that he will have a personal relationship with Moses. And he also tells him to tell Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, tell them, I will be who I will be has sent you. In other words, he desires to have that same unique relationship with them as well. And if you read Exodus chapter 19, where he speaks from Mount Sinai to all the community of Israel, he says, now then, if you listen to my voice and keep my covenant, then you will be my own treasure from among all people, for all the earth is mine. So as for you, you will be a kingdom of Kohanim, a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to Bnei Israel. He spoke to Abraham, he spoke to Isaac, he spoke to Jacob, and to Moses, all having a unique relationship with Adonai. And here he tells our people Israel that he wants to speak to them, thereby having a unique relationship with each of them as well. And so this is a very unique relationship God desired to have with his people, Israel. And think about this. He's about to begin a relationship with Moses that's going to dwarf each and every other relationship in the Tanakh. At least that's recorded in the Tanakh. No one has had a clearer or closer relationship with the Holy One, no other prophet, other than Yeshua himself. And Deuteronomy tells us that in chapter 34, verse 10 and 12. It says, there has not risen again a prophet like Moses, whom God knew face to face, with all the signs and wonders Adonai sent him to do in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh and all of his servants and all his land. Be strong by the strong hand and great awe that Moses did in the sight of Israel. The Holy One had to have a personal relationship with each of these men. The one thing that separates these men from all of the rest of the world is they were chosen by God before they did a single thing, good or bad. Because they were God's chosen. God reached out to them, worked with them, walked with them. And through that relationship, they became Tzaddikim, examples for each and every one of us of a righteous man. And I would add that just as with Israel, he wants to speak to all of you as well. Well, here with Moses, the Holy One is going to make that unmistakably clear. Moses is not looking for God. He's content with shepherding the flock for his father-in-law and his wife. And he's not a righteous man. Let's face it, he was a murderer. He's being pursued by Egypt for murder. However, God has chosen Moses, and so the Holy One actually goes looking for him. And let me let you in on a little secret. Adonai doesn't always dwell in a burning bush on a regular basis anyway. He's there because he chose Moses to redeem his people from Egypt. We saw the same thing with Jacob. Jacob was God's chosen from before his birth. And God orchestrated his life until the day he rested his head on some rocks. And then, and only then, when the time was right, when he would be most receptive, he introduced himself to his chosen, and the relationship began. The same is true with all of us. Now, you may think that you found God one day, but understand that just as with Moses, God orchestrated your life. And when the time was right, and you were in the right place, and you were most receptive, he found you, and he revealed himself to you by touching your heart so that you would be receptive to the message. Now let's go to verse 14 here, where Moses asked God, what should I say to the people of Israel? What is your name? Who sent me? God is about to tell Moses his name. However, before he speaks his name, he gives us important information about himself. And so God said to Moses, I am who I will be. And then he said, you are to say to Bnei Israel, I am, has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, you ought to say to Bnei Israel, Adonai, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name by which I should be remembered from generation to generation. Now before he tells him his name, he says, I am who I am. And that is how it appears in most Christian Bibles. However, it's really not a good translation of Asher Ehyeh. It does not mean I am who I am. If you look at this word Ehyeh, you'll note that it comes from a three-letter root meaning to be. And if we look to other passages where it's used, you're going to find that it's most often translated, I will be, not I am, but it will be translated, I will be who I will be. Which is close to how the Stone's Chumash translates it. They say, I shall be who I shall be. The structure here is called Edem per Edem, and it means, it's used elsewhere in the Tanakh. A few examples are, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy. I will show compassion on who I will show compassion. And the construction is used to express the totality and the absolute self-determination of the God of Israel. God is telling Moses before he speaks the sacred name what the name means. He speaks of his character, his power, and his freedom to be who he will be. So before he speaks his name, the Holy One wants Moses, who's going to become his friend, to know that he's not bound by anything, that he can be exactly who he chooses. He has no entanglements in this world, no superior that can limit him. But he will be exactly who he will be, and no one else can say that. No angel, no man can say that. In the same way, he's also telling us that I'm not bound by the thoughts of men. I'm not bound by your understanding of who he is. I will be who I will be. And with that in mind, you might begin to understand why we fail to understand the relationship between Yeshua and the Father. If he wants to come to us through his Son, he'll be who he will be. He can do it. There's nobody who can stop it. The Holy One is speaking to Moses from the flame of a fire in a bush. He's speaking to him from the bush. The text says the angel of the Lord appeared to him in the fire of the bush. So when Moses asks him, what is your name? He gives him first the definition. He says, I will be who I will be. Telling us that if he wants to come to you in a flaming bush, or if he wants to come to you as the angel of the Lord, he'll be who he wants to be. And if you take those words to heart, they can solve many mysteries of the Tanakh and the Messianic writings as well. It can help you understand the mystery that we have in the text today. Remember, it was the angel of Adonai who appeared to him in the flame of a fiery bush, and it was the angel of Adonai in the bush. And then it says Adonai saw him turn, and Elohim spoke to him from the bush. So we wonder and speculate. However, if we take this literally, the words of Adonai, we can understand that he will be who he will be. And then it is not so hard to understand. It will help us understand the words of Yeshua. If we go to John chapter 8 and verse 5, it says, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it and was thrilled. Then the Judeans said to him, you're not even 50 years old and you've seen Abraham? So he speaks a mystery to them. However, they take him literally and say, you're not yet 50? And Yeshua says to them, amen, amen. I tell you, before Abraham was, I am. And they picked up stones to throw at him, but Yeshua hid himself and went out of the temple. When you couple this with our reading today and you consider the response of the Pharisees, there's something that is obvious or should be obvious to the most skeptical. It was certainly obvious to the Pharisees. First he says, amen, amen. making his next words emphatic. The word amen is related to the word emunah, or faith or truth. One commentator believed that amen was an acronym for El Melech Ne'eman, or God, faithful ruler. So in using this, Yeshua is saying, truthfully, I tell you, and then he says, before Abraham, Ehyeh, I am. Yeshua identified himself with the Holy One in the flesh. In other words, they are one and the same. If you see him, you see the Father. He's also saying that the Holy One is who he will be. He will appear and speak through whom he will appear and speak. And he has chosen his Son, Yeshua. And the response of the Pharisees certainly confirms that, because they were ready to kill him. And so this goes a long ways to help us understand the relationship between Yeshua and the Father. But next the Holy One says in verse 15, Adonai, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is the name, my name forever, the name by which I should be remembered from generation to generation. So now he tells him his name, who he is, his character, his name. And if we look at the name, we can see how they are related. If you look at the name, we determine that it comes from a three-letter root, He, Yod, He. And we find that the root means to be or existing. The same root for Ehyeh also means to be. So he is to be remembered forever as the God who was, who is, and who will be exactly who he will be. He will be present to watch over you. He will be present to hear you, to see you, to know you. He is the one who said, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy. I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But I wanted to close this message today with the thought of Nachmanides on this phrase, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. It's somewhat different as he interprets it in the light of another three words. Nachmanides says this, the name Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh teaches us that God will be with the people of Israel in the same way the people will be with God. If the people are giving, God will be giving. If the people are not giving, then God will not be giving to the people. And so this midrash couples this with Mida Keneged Mida. As you judge, you will be judged. He tells us that God will be as we will be. Like any good rabbi, he combines it also with good deed giving. If you are a giver, then God will be who he will be. He will be a giver to you. And I completely agree with the Midrash, because Yeshua said something very similar in Matthew chapter 7 and verse 2. He says, for with the judgment you judge, you will be judged. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And so Yeshua tells us here that with the measure that we use in our judgment of men, Adonai will measure the same to you. You see, Nachmanides was exactly correct, because God is who he will be. He can be a giver to the giver. He can be a teacher to the one who teach, a forgiver of sin to the one who forgives the sins against him. And the Torah teaches he will have compassion on those he will have compassion. And I can tell you that we could rephrase that and say, he will have compassion on the compassionate. He says, I will have mercy on those I will have mercy. And we could rephrase that to say, he will have mercy on those who are merciful. You don't have to know how to pronounce those four letters, Yud He Vav He, to remember the name. What you have to remember is what he's done for you. And he will be who he will be. And he tells us who he will be further on in Exodus chapter 34, verse 6. Then Adonai passed before him and proclaimed, Adonai, Adonai, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abundant in loving kindness and truth, showing mercy to a thousand generations, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, yet by no means leaving the guilty unpunished, but bringing the iniquity of the fathers upon the children's children, unto the third and fourth generation. Then Moses bowed his head to the earth and worshiped. And so let us worship the one who was, the one who is, and the one who will be who he will be.